Welcome everybody to the Fantasy Golf Insider Webcast and Podcast. I am Zach Turcotte, aka Mysteriously, and joined tonight by our special co-host and newest columnist. We've got Pari, or Hit the High Draw, as you may well know him on Twitter. He's going to be filling in tonight. Jeffrey's off playing with the family over at Wisconsin Dells, so he's splashing around on the hottest week of the year, taking a little week off, much like the rest of the PGA Tour this week in general, so he'll be out for the week. The webcast is available tonight through YouTube, and you can get our podcast on iTunes or Stitcher. Please be sure to go and give us a 5-star review. That helps us out so much, helps move us up in terms of the search engine results that people have, helps people find us a little bit easier, so definitely get on there. Give us that review that we deserve, that we work so hard for every week. This week, the tour will be moving on to the RBC Canadian Open up in Ontario, and I know everybody out there is just as excited as I am for what Pat Mayo would consider to be the unknown seventh major, unspoken seventh major of the season. So a lot of people today were asking me, what's number 6? And I don't really know. It's insignificant. Yeah. It doesn't matter. This one's behind those. Right. Anything that you would consider 6, this is behind all of those. So it's an interesting week this year. You know, obviously with the Olympics coming up in the next few weeks, we've got some really strange scheduling. So for better or for worse, we had the Open Championship a week ago. Next week, we get the PGA Championship, and then unfortunately, the Canadian Open just kind of gets crushed in between there a little bit. But, you know, before we get too far into that, we want to definitely reach out to a few folks tonight. Give everybody a shout out who had a great weekend with us at the Open Championship. You know, Eric, our stat guy, who we make fun of quite a bit on the show, on and off the show, really, and on Twitter and through email conversations, did a fantastic job last week in putting together a hell of a model. You know, every week we talk to folks about the question of, do you play your cash lineups into GPPs? Because typically the optimal lineups, we have 3 of them out there. We say, you know, utilize these in cash games. And so we get a ton of people who are putting them into the $5, the $10, the $25 double ups that are out there. But I did get a couple questions last week. They said, well, can we play these in GPP? And I said, well, yeah, typically they're chalkier guys. They're going to be a little bit higher owned. But for big events like this, those are the guys that definitely tend to shine. And of course, once again, just like the US Open, the top optimal lineup just absolutely crushed it. It took 57th place. We had about 25 of us in there on the optimal lineup who split up. Each person who did put the optimal lineup in won $1,166. So plenty of folks were excited about that. The number 2 lineup actually did really well also. I mean, for a tournament with over 100,000 entries, I think it was probably in the 500 to 1,000 range. So, you know, still pretty high, still paid out a winning amount. You know, 2 of 3. Obviously, those 2 won in cash games. All 3 of the lineups actually were 6 and 6, but there were so many guys this past week who ended up getting teams of 6 of 6 through the cut that it did knock the percentages down in terms of cashing on some of those. So a really great week. I wanted to make sure that we did send a shout out to Ray Melanson, Jordan Gellert, Walter Hussey, Brian Allen, Richard Carnell, Mark Mercado, and we had Scott Shapiro actually won the 5K backspin on there, so that was tremendous. And then as usual, Modified DFS is a big follower of us on Twitter. He had another big week. He's a guy who's pretty consistently up there. So lots of folks who did really well this past week that we were really excited about. One guy who didn't do quite as well was the gentleman who played against me in the Wacky Wager this past weekend. And unfortunately, he went up against optimal lineup number 2 and got absolutely annihilated by a couple hundred points. It was at _Phobes023, guy who's been following us for quite a while. And I didn't win too much, though. So all I wanted this past week was a John Daly golf ball. So, you know, a lot of folks make fun of me on the Wacky Wagers. I think a couple people actually said, is that almost like a form of theft with some of the prizes that some of these people are giving to you week to week? I said, you know, I take what people offer. So last week, a John Daly golf ball was offered, and I took it, and I crushed them. So I was pretty excited about that. It moved the record to 17 wins and 11 losses on the season. So I haven't embarrassed myself, which was just the overall goal of starting up the contest. So that's been a lot of fun for us. Make sure we get some good offers this week. We've still got one more major coming up next week. So put up some fun stuff. I'll try to get some golf balls, some sweatshirts, hats. We just got a whole new shipment of swag, so I'm pretty excited about that. If you notice it, my head is sparklingly clean tonight.
Beautiful.
So it's not the dingy, dusty one that you normally see on my head each week. So that was Wacky Wagers for the week. Moving on, Shot of the Week. There were a whole bunch of shots of the week that we really could do. I wanted to do one almost as a tribute to the amazing play that we saw from Phil Mickelson and Henrik Stenson over the weekend. I can't ever remember another tournament like that where the two front runners blew away the rest of the field by such a large margin. I mean, here you have Phil Mickelson beating the third place winner by 11 strokes, basically, in JB Holmes. So he's minus 17. Holmes is minus 6. And he still loses by 3 shots because Henrik Stenson was so lights out the last day, which is kind of a new thing for Stenson. On this stage, for Stenson to perform that well is kind of amazing. But we're negative people here.
We are.
At Fantasy Golf Insider. We don't like talking about positive things. So what I wanted to do was talk a little bit about Billy Horschel, which is why you've got your hat on backwards over here. And Billy looked like he was going to be a great pick for me. He was 6,800. I was really excited about him. He played amazing the first day, minus 4. He looks like he's going to be right in the mix. And then day 2 happened, and it wasn't quite as good. So he lost a few strokes on the front 9, so he's minus 1 coming to the back 9. But the cut's at plus 4. So as long as he doesn't lose more than 5 strokes on the back 9, he's cruising into the weekend. He can probably rally when the weather gets a little better, because that late shift on Friday afternoon with those tee times was pretty brutal. I fell asleep. I thought that the cut was going to be around like 1-2 range, maybe would sneak up to 2, and then the winds really kicked in and just laced everybody. And all of a sudden it's plus 4 and plus 5 was even in the conversation for a little bit. So getting back to Billy though, Billy is out at the back 9, and he shot 11 over par on the back 9, which I couldn't do. I could not have equaled that score. Knowing how good of a golfer you are though, I think even you probably could have managed a 46, or less than better than a 46 on the back. No, you don't think so?
For this podcast, we'll say.
So when I saw that happen, and of course I had a 10% stake in him, I was not terribly happy, because that did wipe out a few of my lineups, and then wiped out a couple of subscribers' lineups as well. And my thought on that, if you shoot plus 14 in a round like that in a major championship, and you are a competitive player like Billy Horschel is, you really should have to have an A in parentheses next to your name to justify a score that bad. So Billy Horschel, I mean, at least he went out in style. Had he missed by just one shot, it was a little more heartbreaking. But I mean, he just went right over a cliff the whole way through. So Billy Horschel, this shot's to you, buddy.
Cheers to ejecting.
Now you better put your hat on right, or Jeffrey's going to be a little upset.
Sorry, Jeff.
And getting back to our recap this week, obviously we talked a little bit about at the top the way that Henrik Stenson and Phil Mickelson just destroyed this field this week. And I had a little bit of Phil and a tiny bit of Stenson on the optimal. How'd your core do this week?
Not good.
Really?
Yeah.
Who let you down?
Adam Scott. He didn't live up to where I had projected him the whole week.
Yeah, he didn't live up to where anybody projected him for the week.
The way that he had been playing wasn't really optimistic, but I figured, maybe a turn was coming.
Yeah.
But it didn't come. So we'll look for the PGA, hopefully, for him to turn things around.
Yeah, it's been rough. I mean, since that little 3-week stint there, the first, he hasn't followed that with anything.
Nothing.
For the rest of the year. I'm really shocked that he wasn't able to build onto that momentum. It seems like the putter's slowly gotten away from him again.
It's gone.
Which has been amazingly frustrating. He started out okay on Thursday. He was -2, and then just slowly fell back the whole rest of the weekend. Could just never gain back any ground, never could sink a putt.
Right.
It was pretty awful to watch. I had him on my core group as well. So both of us just kind of got smacked there. All 5 of my guys actually made it through the cut in terms of core players. I had 5 guys at 60%. Scott was one leading the way. I had Rory and Sergio, who did pretty well, but I needed one of them to be like top 2 or 3 for sure. So when they were both at 5th or 6th or whatever it was they ended up finishing, that wasn't quite enough. And then I had Lee Westwood, who looked like he was going to fall off a cliff, and actually fought back the last day pretty well. Finished right around 20th, 22nd, somewhere in that range. Martin Kaymer broke my heart because I really thought he was headed for really great things. Into day 2, he's -7, which if you just hold par the rest of the tournament, you take third place.
Right.
And he gets to, I think it was a 10th hole, and he needs to get up and down. He's not that far out. He chips it about halfway up the hill, and it rolls down, and I just think, oh,
here it comes.
Fuck, there it goes. And sure enough, from the next shot, all the way across the green into the shit, the next shot doesn't even quite get all the way up onto the green, and he ends up making a triple. And from there, I just tweeted out. I said,
it was bad.
Kaymer is now out of contention. He bogeyed the next hole, and then he just slid back the rest of the weekend, and he ended up finishing like 37th or somewhere in that range. So a little bit ineffective for his finish. So it was just a little bit disappointing because the core was so strong that first day, and I had Zach Johnson and I had Phil Mickelson up there. So I had a lot of lineups that were right in the mix that I thought were going to do really well over the weekend. And then Zach slid back, and all the other guys kind of slid back a little. And we had a lot of weird names up at the top.
Yeah.
I mean, JB Holmes finishing 3rd. I can see some people who would have been a little bit excited about Holmes, but I mean, he looked terrible in Scotland. I mean, I don't know if you had any of them this last week, but he was awful
I didn't.
in Scotland.
So somebody on Twitter had asked me what I thought of him on like Tuesday or Wednesday, and I said I liked him a lot better 2 weeks ago.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it kind of crushed you.
For this tournament, I really liked him, but then he ejected at the Scottish Open.
Right.
I was like, well, okay,
and
there goes my JB shares. I'm not even.
It wasn't like he just barely missed.
No, he was gone.
He was awful, and then when you look at his course history at open courses, you just think
he's not a links player.
No,
and somehow he became one in 24 hours.
Yeah, and see some of the guys that were up there. I mean, you see Finau finishing up high, which is a little bit of a surprise. He did well at Chambers Bay, so I'll give him that. But it wouldn't have been the type of course being as inaccurate as he is, where I would have thought he would have been okay. I would think that a guy like Finau's game would kind of mirror what Bubba does at Opens. Instead, he was great. Bill Haas did really well, which is a surprise.
Yeah, which is really surprising.
Bill Haas never does well at majors. He's never
very
inside
boring.
the top 10. So for him to be up there was definitely a surprise. Beef Johnson was...
I like Beef.
I like him too. I just didn't think that this would be an event where he'd be able to be in the top 10. So there's another guy who...
I didn't think that highly of him, but I thought that he'd play well, and I did think that he'd finish inside top 20. I did write him up in my preview article, and I think I'm just going to keep writing him up because he's going to cover me more times than not.
Is he going to be the UK's version of Will Wilcox?
He could be.
Yeah.
Will's hacking right now, so I'm gonna.
Yeah,
we're gonna
maybe want to lay off a Will for a while. But Beef seems to like the attention. He's interacting
Twitter,
quite a bit on Twitter. He's just kind of a goofball of a guy.
Yeah.
You see him out there with the big shaggy beard, the personality. He's one of those guys who I think could attract a lot of attention when he finally does come over to the PGA Tour.
And he played well at the U.S. Open, and he played well at the Scottish Open as well, I believe.
Yeah, I can't remember where he finished over in Scotland, but he's had a decent season. He's definitely been an up and coming player. So, from that perspective, things were looking good, and then they kind of petered out a little. He had a lot of different names that I wouldn't have necessarily expected, and the star players who I faded. I wasn't on Day at all. I didn't own any shares of Day.
I didn't own
any shares of DJ, which ended up working out. I mean, DJ ended up still top 10,
backdoor top 10, never in contention.
But when you're priced number 2. You need
when
more.
Third place is 11 strokes off the lead, anybody can come in the top 10.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
But if you started him, it was tougher.
It was disturbing.
And there were some good rosters that had DJ, but it wasn't because they had DJ. It was because they hit the whole world.
Because they had Kelson and Beef probably and somebody else.
Yeah, exactly. So they had a lot of those guys. So it was a tough event in terms of. I felt like I had a lot of the right guys, and in regular years, you'd probably would have worked out. I mean, if we get a little better performance out of Adam Scott, I think the whole thing changes up quite a bit for us. So it was mildly disappointing, but still a lot of good things happened. I mean, having the one lineup that really hits and takes off, and the Millionaire Maker, that can kind of take away a lot of the pain.
It's a nice ROI.
Things. And I mean, when you won 2 out of 3 cash games, so that's the big thing every week. We've been saying it over and over all season with major events. Go heavy on cash games. I mean, people ask about, I can usually do 1 or 2 Millionaire Maker lineups, and I always think, well, if that's going to be a big percentage of your bankroll, you're just throwing darts at this point, because you're going to end up loser more often than not. Where if you just put that towards cash, with a lot of the lineups that we're putting out there for value, you're gonna end up winning. This is the 3rd major in a row. this season that we've done really well in terms of cash games, and we had a great record last year in terms of cash games at the majors. So stick with the strategy, stick with what works, go heavy with cash.
And play a combination of cash games. I played the same guy in a couple medium to high dollar head-to-heads, and he didn't even put in a lineup. So that was easy money right there.
That's always fun.
Yeah. I was really happy when I saw that on Thursday afternoon. I was like, 0, huh?
So at least you've got some green on your screen.
Right. That was all I saw.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that great? And then you get that little message from DraftKings on Sunday, that
you
email.
Won.
I'm like,
no, I didn't.
I hate that, DraftKings. I hate that.
Thank you.
That. I don't want the email.
Thank you, valued customer.
That just makes me that much angrier on a bad Sunday when that kind of stuff happens. So, overall, it was still a fun tournament. Just an amazing finish. I mean, I don't think we're going to see one like that where the top two guys blow out the field for a long time.
It's the first time in my viewing of golf that I've ever seen it. I've seen Tiger run away with it, but never two.
We saw Spieth last year at the Masters just crush everybody out there. But
it's never been
another where you've had like a duel like that.
Well, the PGA, but then again, there was still a couple guys that were still in it.
We're still hanging around. Yeah. So pretty good tournament. And then next week, we're back into another Millionaire Maker, another major. So we'll be talking about that again. But, this week, let's keep the energy going here, right?
All right.
We've got the honorary 7th major, as we mentioned, Pat Mayo calls it, the RBC Canadian Open, held up in Ontario.
Hey.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a really not so strong field this week. A lot of guys are here basically because they have that little RBC on their arm or
it's the bank
on their chest, and it's a pretty good sponsor for them. So those guys. What's kind of nice about that is those guys who are sponsored are not they're star players, and they're not going to kick it in,
right?
Because they want to do well for their sponsors. Their sponsors are going to send out a lot of people. They're going to be doing a lot of autographs, handshakes, all that kind of stuff. They do not want to let their sponsors down, and Jason Day did not let the tournament down last year when he absolutely drilled about a 30-foot putt to close the event out. I think Bubba Watson was really close. He was staring down the fairway at him, and Day drilled. It was at least a 20-footer.
He said he wasn't going to leave it short.
Yeah, and he just nailed it to put it away, and it started a great run for him down the stretch last season. So it should still be at least an exciting tournament. We're going to try to make it kind of exciting. It's going to be at Glen Abbey Golf Course this week, which, if you look at tournament history, be sure to focus on just a few years for the Canadian Open. We've got 2015, 2013, 2009, 2008, and then 2004, which a little bit inconsequential.
Like 4 players from 2004.
Yeah, there's not too many guys that played there, so really just the last 4 on there. We've isolated those years pretty well on our tournament history chart. But Perry, why don't you give us a little bit of a breakdown on the course?
Well, it's in Canada.
Okay.
So we got that going for us this week.
Yeah.
7,200 yards, par 72. You got 4 par 4s, 4 par 5s, 4 par 3s. Key stats we're going to look at is definitely par 5 scoring this week. You're going to need to be long off the tee, so strokes gained tee to green, strokes gained off the tee is another one of the new strokes gained statistics that PGA Tour puts out. I think that will help kind of narrow down some of your plays this week, as well as birdie or better as usual.
Yeah, we've always got the main ones. I mean, it looks like the main ones are going to make up about 70%. So between tee to green, putting, birdie or better, that's going to be about 70% this week. We got par 5 scoring, that's about 15%. Strokes gained approach from the Fantasy Golf Metrics guys is going to be about 10, and then they also came up with proximity from 110 to 125 was another 5%, and then a couple of the other ones that Perry mentioned also as well for kind of coming up with what it's going to look like to balance. Anything else that you want to throw in on the course?
I like to look at the birdie or better statistics per par. So like par 3, birdie or better, par 4, and par 5, just to kind of see, where the player, who and how are they doing it. Because the birdie or better percentage stat on PGAtour.com is an average for all 3.
All of them, yeah.
So you can, if a guy is high on par 3 birdie or better, it's going to show a better overall average.
Right.
But that's not really going to help you in this case. You know what I mean? So I like to look at and break down each of those per player. Outside of that, I do look at proximity to the hole and rough proximity too, just to kind of see, who's hitting the ball close.
And some other a little superstitious kind of things this week. It's up in Canada, so the temptation obviously is going to be to look at more Canadian-born players. We've got just really a handful. There's not that many that are going to get you real excited this week. We've got David Hearn is in the field, who's been pretty good this season.
Yep.
You've got Graham Dillette, who may or may not withdraw from the field. I know he's been a little bit banged up again, so that may or may not happen.
Wow. He shaved his beard last week. Actually, he looks like he's about 18 years old.
Wow. Well, the beard wasn't doing anything for him luck-wise. So you got Dillette that's out there. You've got Nick Taylor, and then you've got a handful of guys that are going to come up. And every year, a couple of these guys. And I was looking for a few names. I didn't even see them. Usually, I saw, like, last year, Adam Stenson was here. Mm-hmm. He's not in the field this year. I was kind of looking for him. Was it Austin Connolly?
Yes.
He's another Canadian-born player. I was looking for him in the field. He's not there this year. So we've got this whole new field of
There's this
Canadian
guy named
guys.
Michael Weir.
Oh, Weir.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Apparently, he used to play really
I think he
well
was good
here
at one
over
time.
the years. He's got an amazing course history. Now, I know you're a team course history guy. Are you going to roster him up this week?
Absolutely not.
No, I don't think so either. It's kind of sad for Mike Weir because
it's tough.
Yeah, it wasn't even that many years ago. I mean, here's a guy. He's roughly the same age, I think, as Phil Mickelson.
Yep.
So they're not that far apart in age, but one game just nosedived. I mean, just. Right, I mean, he's only made one cut, I think, in the last 2 seasons.
I think maybe you should start playing right-handed.
Something, yes, something, yeah. Because whatever it is, it's been pretty rough. So there's a few Canadians. So that'll be another thing to just take a look at. I don't necessarily know that it always correlates. So I'm not going to play guys just because they're Canadian this week.
No.
I mean, I think David Hearn is still a decent play just because of the fact that he's played well and he's played pretty well in this course.
He's played well here.
But I'm not going to go over the top trying to jump on guys from Canada just because they have so much national pride.
I think you've got plenty of players to choose from where you don't need to take that narrative to that level.
Sure. So I think that'll be one way of looking at things. The other thing we want to think about this week in terms of strategy, what kind of teams are we going to be wanting to build together? Particularly in the GPP levels, but also for cash. And I think what you're going to end up seeing is a lot of stars and scrubs types of lineups because we've got that handful of very elite players. I mean, 1, 2, 3 there at the top. Really 1, 2 very elite, 3 somewhat elite, 4th player there if you get to Snedeker, kind of in and out of the elite range overall. So if you look at those top few guys, I think a lot of people are going to stack those guys up at the top. So you're going to see a lot of teams that are going to start with Day, DJ, and I think there's going to be people who are even going to try to get them both.
Oh, for sure.
On there.
I tried it.
It's painful.
You
end up with a lot of unknown names.
I didn't hit submit. Let's just put it down.
Yeah, not yet. So you're going to see a lot of lineups that are going to be looking at stars and scripts. I could definitely see both Day and DJ approaching close to the 30% range this week. Maybe even a little bit higher depending on the type of action that you're into. So, for strategy-wise, I can't say not to do that because they're just so far head and shoulders above the rest of this field, and they've had pretty good histories here, and they've had elite seasons. And I think that Jason Day has been just a little bit off the last couple times out, so I think he's actually motivated.
He's still playing really well, though. That's the thing.
Yeah.
So he comes in. Obviously, he doesn't know his DraftKings price because he probably doesn't pay much attention to it. But
you're kidding me.
Call me crazy. He's kind of busy with some kid or two kids.
I have 2 kids. I know his price.
Do you play golf every week?
Fantasy golf.
All right.
It's almost as.
But anyways, he's the second highest priced golfer. Sure. He's not the highest priced. So sometimes just that in itself make me think, okay, I'm going to take the second highest priced guy versus the top guy.
Yeah, I mean, because if you just fade those 2 guys and then if they just don't win,
right,
and you've saved yourself a lot of money the rest of the way through. So I think that's definitely going to be the approach because what ends up happening at events like this is you get guys who are typically in the 6,500 to 7,000 range. Now they're 7,000 to 8,000. You get guys who are in the low 7s. Now they're between 8 and 9. And it just goes all the way up. The guys that are 8 are pushed into the 9 range. I mean, you got Tony Finau up at 9,300 this week. And he's been playing pretty well, but 9,300 is a tough price for Tony. Tony's got kind of a
tough price for Tony.
He's kind of a 25 to 10 range guy for the most part. Yeah. He doesn't have a lot of top 10 finishes.
No, he doesn't.
25 to 10 is sort of his sweet spot during the year. But if he gets up into that 9 to 10 range, it gets harder and harder to start to pull the trigger on a guy like that, particularly when there's such a dearth of talent down below. But looking up at the top, I haven't made up my mind if I'm going to be fading DJ or Day this week. Odds are I think I probably will end up having a fair share of both of them in my lineups as far as breakdown goes. I'll probably see as much as I can get. I won't be able to squeeze 60% for each of them onto my rosters because that would just bleed me to death elsewhere. But I could definitely see 30 to 40% on each just because I think they are so far above the rest of the field. Are you in on those guys this week, or are you going to take the risk and be out?
No, I'm in. I wrote in my article, my preview article that's up on the website, if I have 2 lineups, I'm starting both with each player. And then I'm probably going right down to Kuchar as my second play. And that's going to force me a little bit lower than I'm comfortable with. But I think Kuchar's course history here kind of speaks for itself. And his current form has been a little sketchy recently, but coming into it, I mean, he was just killing top tens.
So now when we look at that, so we got Day, DJ, Kuchar right up at the top, and I think all of them are going to be highly owned. Mm-hmm. Does that make Snedeker the contrarian play there, the fourth guy?
Or even Jim Furyk, which I hate to say.
Yeah, who's been amazing at this event over the years, but still, I mean, he hasn't been. He had the one flash where
at the U.S. Open
at the U.S. Open where he looked great, and he hasn't really been all that impressive in any of his other events.
And I kind of thought last week at the British Open the Open Championship. Silly me. I thought that if it came down to like a par fest, he would kind of elevate his game and maybe make a couple extra birdies, but it never happened for him.
No, it didn't. So I think he's another tough one to be on.
But he has his scoring under par at this course is ridiculous. The 2 times that he's won in 2006 and 2007, which actually wasn't at this course, but the tournament itself, he's 30 under in 2 years. So he's clearly got some scoring ability. It's just, do we always see that out of Furyk? And the answer is no.
So it's tough. So obviously we're going to start up there at the top. That means if we're going to have a lot of those guys at the top, we're probably going to have to skip down a little bit. So there's not much in the 9 range that I looked at much. There's one guy there in the middle 8 range, in Emiliano Grillo. I think he's been playing really excellent golf this season. At 8,500, he's starting to get to the point where, I mean, if he was in the 9 range, I might have to pass over him, but at 8,500 this week, he was 22nd last year. He's made now, 6 straight cuts. He's made 3 straight top 15s. So he's been playing really good, solid golf overall. His putting numbers are not going to look good this week, but you have to realize that those are his overall putting numbers.
Right.
One of the tools that we look at, Fantasy Golf Metrics has a great tool where they break down putting statistics between the types of
really
grasses.
Nice.
He's terrible on Bermuda, and he's actually really good on bent grass. Mm-hmm. We're on bent grass this week. All of his other stats actually line up reasonably well for the course, and so if you can actually say that his putting is solid for this grass, I think him at 8,500, I think Grillo at 8,500 is a pretty good buy. Is there anybody between like 10K and the middle 8K range that you've got your eye on that you'll have on a lot of your rosters this week?
I think Grillo is one of those guys. I left him out of my article today just because by the time I had published it, I'd already seen like 6 or 7 tweets about Grillo.
Yeah, so, it's tough, and that's the disadvantage. That's one of the reasons we stagger our articles a little bit too.
So I was like, I'm just gonna skip over writing him up because he's gonna be a chalk play by the end of the week. But I do like him, and you know what? You have to play chalk sometimes.
Yeah, you're gonna have to have 1 or 2 guys that are chalk and that do well, especially with what we've seen the last.
But I do like Kevin Kisner as well. He's been trending in the right direction. He's kind of let me down.
He's been less terrible.
Yeah.
So he still hasn't. This hasn't been great, but he has been less terrible.
Well, he did this, and then at the Scottish Open he did this, and then he kind of plateaued a a little bit at the Open.
So you think it's ready?
So I think he's coming back
sweep back up again.
I'm trying to be optimistic.
Okay, well,
one of us needs to be.
We don't do that on our show.
One of us needs to be.
We don't do that. So take that smile off your face. So
I hate fantasy golf.
Perfect. That's much better. So and dropping down a little bit, we mentioned David Hearn before. He's a guy at 7,900 that I'm definitely going to be on this week. I was looking at the Canadians this week, and I was a little bit shocked because I wanted to start looking at David Hearn and Adam Hadwin, and then I saw Adam Hadwin's price at 8,700.
American dollars or Canadian?
Either way.
All right.
Yeah. So he's 8,700, which shocks me that he is that much higher than David Hearn. You would normally think they would be either very close in price, or for an event like this where Hearn's been pretty good over the years, and season-wise, he's been very consistent coming in. You'd maybe think Hearn would be, a little bit higher. So, I guess I haven't decided if I'll buy into Hadwin, thinking that the 8,700 price tag will scare people off, but I'm definitely will be buying into David Hearn down at 7,900. He was third here last year. He's made the cut here 3 straight times. Struggled at the beginning of the season. Obviously, he's got his game together now. But I think he's a pretty solid value play and definitely will be on a lot of my cash game rosters this week. And we haven't looked at the model yet for the week, but I'm anticipating that he will rank very well within the model.
He should pop pretty high.
Who do you like in the value range?
Well, it depends on what you're playing, but I do like Colt Knost, Big Gravy. Seems to be kind of playing pretty well.
Is he going to bounce back after
I think he will.
Shitty
He's not a links player. It was his first time at the Open.
Garbage.
He didn't have a ladle for the gravy.
He started out well. The first front 9 he was -3 on day one, and then
Bubba started out like -4, and then he kind of bubbled.
I mean, he looked good. He was still -1 with 2 holes to go, and then what happened? The end of the first round for him, he triple bogeyed and bogeyed to end the day, and so he went from -1 looking great to +3. Not so good, and then the second day, obviously teeing off later in the day, it just kind of kicked him in the nuts, and he fell off after that. But
I don't know. I was happy to see that he was only 7,100 this week.
There's a couple guys down there too.
Yeah.
I think Daniel Summerhays is going to be a lock for me to play this week. He has to be highly owned here.
He's Storm and Marmon.
I can't. Yes, he's going to be focused.
He's going to be focused.
He wasn't taking in too much of that Scottish ale over there. No
right.
Scotch for him. It's a shame. But, he was 11th here last year. He's made, like 8 or 10 straight cuts overall. He looked exceptional. He was a top 10 at the U.S. Open at Oakmont. So his game's been really sharp. Not a guy who's going to hit the ball a mile off the tee, obviously by any stretch, but his putting is really elite. And that, and if you're a top 10 putter, that's going to keep you alive on just about any course layout. And surprisingly, for not being a big ball hitter, he actually scores really well on the par 5s. Birdie or better percentage, pretty good as well. So I would anticipate, at 7,000, it blows my mind. There are guys here who we were talking about whose names I did not recognize before today that are priced higher than Daniel Summerhays this week. Blows my mind. So at 7,000, I actually had to look back on my phone when I was looking at it. I thought, is that a mistake? That had to at least have been 8, right? 7,000, he will be on a ton of my cash games this week. And I'm still probably going to play him on GPP, although I do think that he will be pretty heavily owned. Who are some of those unknown names? You had a couple of those unknown names in the 7 range that you wanted to. Do we want
to talk about it on the podcast, or do we want to leave that to the subscribers?
No, we don't want to talk about that on the podcast. Actually, we will keep that a secret. We actually had somebody cancel last week because they got such great information from the webcast. So again, thank you for the feedback. We'll keep those names quiet. Be sure to check out the Daily Spin or Pari's preview for some of those unknown names. Who's a chalkier name in the 7,000s that you want to talk about before we drop down into some of the sleepers?
In the 7,000s, let's talk about Chad Campbell. You think he's going to be chalky?
He's 6,800. Yeah,
he's on the verge.
Yeah, I think I like him. He's a guy that I'm going to own this week. Another guy who I think you can play and you can get away with playing him in cash this
Absolutely.
week. So, if you want to start a lineup with DJ or Day for your cash lineups, which isn't that bad of an idea.
No.
You go down and you get a guy like Chad Campbell. It balances things out right away for you, and immediately you're back to being able to spend 75 to 8,000 for the rest of your guys. He's done really well here the last few years, and he's been on a pretty nice run of late. I think he's made, if I'm looking at it right, he's made 5 straight cuts. He's got a couple of top 15s. Then he's been in the top 15 or the top 20 here the last couple of times out at Glen Abbey. So I think he's a pretty nice play. The guy that you like Dirt McGirt up
I do
there
like
at
Dirt McGirt.
7,700. Yeah.
Honestly, I thought he was going to be priced in like the 9K range this week just because of how weak the field was and his history.
Yeah.
At Glen Abbey, he was 34th last year and second in 2015.
Yep.
15. Was it 15?
2013. Yep. And he's had a pretty good year overall.
Yeah. He's got a win. He's got a 7th place finish in his last 5 at the WGC.
He missed the cut at Oakmont, and he missed the cut by a stroke.
Yeah,
this last week.
He's been on.
But those are.
I'm throwing that out as an outlier.
Yeah, you don't really have to look at the major. For a guy like McGirt, I wouldn't pay a whole lot of attention to the majors.
He's the first guy that I looked at when I saw pricing. I was like, okay, he's cash.
Okay,
for sure.
So there's a guy in the 7,000s that's looking pretty good. And then kind of dropping down, I guess, a little bit. We talked about Campbell in the 6,000 range. There's a couple of guys that are a little bit lower this week that I definitely do like. I think I'll probably just give out the one because I think people will see it. But right down at 5,800, I'm going to give you one good sleeper, and I'm going to save the rest. And it's one that we talked about a little bit off air here before the show started. But he withdrew last week, so you had a little bit of concerns. But I think that actually I think that'll take some of the ownership level away from him a little bit. So I think for GPP play, we'll get back to Camilo Villegas. Now, Camilo broke my heart today by withdrawing from the Olympics. I mean, when I saw the ESPN headline,
you might as well have tweeted like the broken heart emoji.
I mean, I just thought, wow. I mean, I was so excited before about the Olympics, but now Camilo is not playing. I mean, I was heartbroken.
How are you going to cheer for Colombia?
I don't even know if I can watch it now. But I kind of liked his rationale, and it said very specifically about Camilo that he was withdrawing from the Olympics so he could focus on keeping his tour card. Because right now he's about 146. He needs to be 125. He's a guy every year who's going to be grinding to get to that 125 number in order to keep his card. And this is a Camilo event.
It is.
He's had 4 straight top 25 finishes here at this event not 4 straight top 20, 4 straight made cuts in his career. Before the withdrawal over the weekend, he had made 4 straight cuts. Pay a little bit of attention, see if that injury flares up, but he's probably only got about 3 tournaments left here to make enough noise.
The Wyndham, John Deere, that's about it. That's all I got.
In the Canadian.
And the Canadian
and
Open.
that's it. So he's got those 3. So I would almost definitely think he's going to be in there playing this week, because if he doesn't play this week, he's going to slip that much further down in the rankings. It's going to be that much tougher for him. So I think he could be a decent...
do you think he's going to play the John Deere if he bailed from the Olympics? Even though he cited keeping his card, I mean,
I think he's got to. I think he will.
I would hope so.
I would think he would have to. Yeah, I mean, I would think that'd be part of the rationale. So I think that'll be one of my sleeper plays. I'm not going to own a lot. I might own 5%, maybe 10 if I feel like he's kind of healthy. But like I said, he's got to play in these last 3, and he's got to do well in these last 3. So
I think motivation.
Motivation is a positive. Not that these guys don't want to play well,
but motivation.
It does, and especially in these quieter weeks where some of the guys are just, kind of treading water. I think it's.
If you paid attention to any golf media in the last couple of weeks, professional golfers are extremely selfish people. And all they care about is money.
No.
So they don't care about
integrity,
your stupid Olympics,
spirit of the game.
They don't care about gold medals. All they care about is money, and that's it. So just make it rain.
That's right, Daniel Berger. All right, give us one sleeper and let's get out of here.
No, you know what? I'm going to keep it.
Oh, wow, look at that. Nothing more for you tonight?
Jeff would be proud.
All right, well, I think that's plenty of information. So that's it for the week. You got the Canadian Open here this weekend. Play a little bit lighter. Pull the bankroll back a little bit this week.
You don't want to get burned by a Graham Dillette withdrawal.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Yeah, don't put out too much of your bankroll this week, because you're going to want to play next week when we've got a big field and you've got all the stars that are out there again. And we're going to crush in cash games again, because we've been absolutely annihilating cash.
Play it in GPPs.
At major events. So play some small GPPs, have fun, watch the event, check it out. See if there's any pieces of information that you can kind of glean from the event overall. But cut it back just a little bit this week, as we would say before any of the other majors that are out there. But that's all we've got for tonight. Be sure to check us out at fantasygolfinsider.com. I'll be on Periscope this week at my usual time, Wednesday, anytime between about 9:15, whatever the moment really hits me. Whenever I'm really feeling in the groove, I'll get on there and I'll take some questions for 45 minutes to an hour until I'm either tired or bored. And then Pari, he'll be back here eventually. Not a lot of European coverage coming up.
No, we've got nothing for European Tour for like a month.
Yeah, which I think is great for you, isn't it?
It lightens my load a little bit.
Nice little break.
I can focus on the PGA Tour and the guys that we all know.
Yeah, so
rather
not much
than digging all weekend on Euro guys.
Not too much on the Euro side, but that's good. It gives us plenty of time to focus on the main events that are coming down the stretch. So be sure to check us out. FantasyGolfInsider.com, and check me out on Periscope, and good luck this week.
Good luck.